And so we'll start out just by taking a look at the kind of Firebase dashboard, which is just firebase.google.com. And what is Firebase? That question is has a few pieces to it. Firebase right now is a suite of tools. Originally, it was kind of the core product was this real-time database, right? Which is a big NoSQL JSON store that would kind of like notify the client anytime it was changed. Google kind of did a big revamp back at Google I/O 2016 with Firebase 3. And in Firebase 3, you actually had not only the ability to have a real-time database, you had a storage. So if you know, like Amazon S3 buckets or anything along those lines, you could actually store like binary data, authentication, push messaging, a whole suite of tools. And the whole idea is that I'm going to assume some biases in the room, which is we are attending a front-end master's course, so we like to work on the front end. Right, or we aspire to work on the front end, or we are interested in working on the front end. For a lot of applications, the backend can, especially in the early phases, be a lot of boilerplate, right? Like a big part of setting up an application is, okay, let's get the first endpoint up and running. All right, now let's statically serve the public folder. Okay, cool. And I've spent some number of hours, right, doing the kind of same steps over and over and over again to serve a page, right? And there are frameworks that make that easier, but at some point, you can minimize it down, but it's still a certain amount of work. Right. And so Firebase is really good for rapid prototyping of different ideas. So you start out, you have everything that you need to go. And now you're figuring out what is the front end that I'm building? What are the parts that make my application really unique and interesting, right? And kind of focus on those details and have the common things handled for you already. So one way to kind of get a sense of what Firebase offers is to open up a project. We're going to create a new project in a second, but let's take a look at a project that does exist. One of the cool things about Firebase is that it supports multiple platforms. Our major concern today is the web, but it also has an SDK for iOS and for Android, right? Those of you who are familiar with React, it will work perfectly well with React Native as well. So if you choose to go that route, you can use the JavaScript SDK. If you want to build in Swift, Objective-C, or in Java for Android, they also have SDKs available for that, as well as a server-side Node.js SDK for doing stuff on the server should you need to do stuff like that. And we'll talk about when that might be and if you actually need to, and kind of tease that out towards the end of the workshop. And for the database, it is real time, which means you make a connection, and as things change, you get notified. But there is also a REST API for it as well. If you're using a more traditional backend, you just want to talk to Firebase, right? So these are all included. So regardless from what approach you take to building your web application, you're going to have the tools needed, right? And Firebase provides us with an SDK that give us all the functions and methods and stuff along those lines that we need in order to work with it. And depending on your editor, today I'm going to use Visual Studio Code, but it doesn't matter. It's completely agnostic. IntelliSense works great for me, so a lot of times I can take a lucky guess at what the method is and see, okay, this is the full name of the method. This is the arguments it takes, and these are what they do, so on and so forth. And so a lot of times you'll even actually hover over it and see the documentation for it. So the SDK is also really good. It makes developing really easy. So that leads us to our next question. This is a workshop on Firebase and React, right? React kind of useful for building complicated view layer applications. They actually work together. Firebase is not built for React in particular. You can use it with Angular. You can use it with Ember. You can use it with jQuery. You can use it with vanilla DOM manipulation if you want. My kind of major hypothesis today, or the point that my argument, if you will, is Firebase stores stuff as a giant JavaScript object. React components have state, right, which is most of the time a giant JavaScript object, right? And the big thing that React does is when that state changes, it re-renders the DOM based on the current state of your application. Firebase, again, a big JavaScript object database that alerts you to when it's changed, right? These two things kind of play really nicely with each other, right? And we'll kind of see that on a number of levels. We're going to start out building kind of we'll start very simply. It's going to be React with state and all of those things, and see how it plays together there. we'll kind of take a look at the authentication piece. We'll take a look at the database itself, storage. We will host our applications live and just deploy them. We'll take a look at what that looks like to get it on the internet for other people to use. We're even going to take a look at cloud functions, which were released yesterday. So you might see some other ones in here. Some of these other ones are platform specific. So TestLab is more specific for native mobile applications. So we're going to play around with most of the web-focused ones today. But yeah, and then once we get a feel for building a few different applications in just like kind of regular React, we're also going to take a look at building something using Redux as well. Right? Like, what happens when we start like really kind of pushing the limits of, I'm going to pass state down through all these components, I'm going to listen for all these changes, and could we hook it up to kind of a more robust state management system, right? So we'll kind of take a look at how would we kind of roll our own implementation of using Redux, React, and Firebase all together. Then we'll go ahead and we'll deploy it. We'll figure out how to do some stuff in the background that's not on anyone's client. We're going to kind of like build about 4 different applications today, which I think is a testament for how easy it is to work with React and how React as well as Firebase, and how productive it can make you by the fact that like we're going to start from kind of ground zero. And in fairness, the first application is going to be, let's take a JavaScript object and show it on the page. But by the end, we're going to build a chat app that even when the user has the browser window closed, still notifies the user. We'll build an application where users can upload files and store it and see stuff change live as it happens. We'll make an application to solve the age-old question of where do you want to go for lunch with a real-time poll. And then we'll build our simple application first. So yeah, again, like the fact that we can build all these applications in the course of one day together, I think speaks a lot to the kind of productivity increase that comes along with using both Firebase and React together to make the DOM manipulation like fast and easy, as well as storing stuff in the database and kind of like that connectivity as well. Cool. We'll also kind of talk about some patterns to make this like manageable. And see like some of the kind of some best practices and some tricks that I have picked up. I won't call them best practices yet because I like them, but I don't know if we have an industry have agreed upon them. But we'll take a look at those as well to figure out like how to like create really good abstractions for dealing with these things as well.